very special lecture series on scientific writing. I'm Dr. Pervez Ahmad. This is part 7 of the lecture series. And this particular lectures, we will have discussions on the structures of a journal paper. What it means, it means that we will have a discussion on the scientific paper, that is the journal organization of the scientific paper. Be remember here, we will have a lot of data put on the slide for easy understanding of the audience who are not the native speakers, so that they can easily pick the key objective, the key purpose of this lecture. So let's start today's lecture. So, as I mentioned already, that we will have discussions on the scientific paper. So, a well-written scientific paper explains the scientist's motivations for doing an experiments, the experimental design and executions, and the meaning of the results. A scientific paper is written in a style that is exceedingly clear and concise. Their purpose is to inform an audience of other scientists about an important issue and to document the particular approach they use to investigate that issue. Be remember, do not think that good English is not critical in science writing. In fact, scientists try to be so concise that their English should be better than that of the worker and other disciplines. Or if English is not your first language, then proofreading by a native speaker might be helpful. If you have good scientific papers, you will have noticed that a standard format is frequently used. This format allows researchers to present information clearly and concisely. So, title of the paper that can be used by a scientific paper, it has different types. The first type that's normally being used for the title is called indicative title. So, what is indicative titles? Indicative titles mainly indicate the subject matter of a paper, but give no indication of any results obtained or conclusion drawn. So, example of such titles should be like this: the effectiveness of bed net and controlling mosquito at different reasons, at different seasons of the year. It's the kind of the titles that we call indicative title. So unlike indicative titles, we have informative titles. So what is an informative titles? So unlike the indicative titles, the informative titles give an indication of the result achieved and conclusions drawn, as well as the subject matter of the paper. For example, bednet control mosquito most effectively when used in the rainy seasons. So, along with that, we can also have question type titles. So what happened, or what we have in question type titles? So we have the same titles, but we put it in a question type, or we can say that we can put it in a question title like format. So this type of the titles obviously ask questions. For example, when are bed net most effective when used to control mosquitoes? Some of the authors, some of the researchers, they use main subtitle or series type titles. So be remember, this approach is not liked by the editor of the scientific journals, and there is a reason for that. And the reason is that if they accept the first paper, they will be duty bound to accept the sequels. For example, the effect of a bed net on the mosquitoes. So here you have number first, their effectiveness when used only in the rainy seasons. So what it indicate, since it's the series indicate that it's first in the series, so it might be followed by second, third, fourth, and so on. So if the editor accept the first one, so you know that the information will be missing until unless the audience they not fully study the full series. So this is why the editor they don't like such a kind of the title or such a kind of the manuscript. So you know that the journal organizations, as we mentioned at the start of the lecture, consist of abstract introductions, methods, results or result and discussions, or some of the journal they have separate discussion or conclusions, and then at the last we have the literature cited. So the scientific paper, first we come toward the abstract. So what is an abstract? Uh, you know that an abstract is a shortened version of the paper and should contains all the information necessary for the reader to determine. So what are those informations? These information consist: number one, what the objective of the study were; number two, how the study was done; number three, what results were obtained; number four, and the significance of the results. Frequently, reader of the scientific journals will only read the abstract, choosing to read at length those papers that are most interesting to them. For these reasons, and because abstracts are frequently made available to the scientists by various computer abstracting services, this section should be written carefully and succinctly to have the greatest impact and as a few words as possible. So, although it's a fair as a first section in a paper, most scientists write the abstract section last day because they want to have the important information is available at the tip of the finger frame. Because here, this is a point where the reader he decide whether he should go inside the manuscript or not. So, this why this section should be very carefully written. So then, once you study the abstract, then the reader they go towards the introductions. So what is introductions and introduction sections? We have the information or we have the questions, which should be like this: why is this study of scientific interest, and what is your objective? I mean, this is what the people want to see, or this is what normally you express in your introduction sections. So this section discusses the results and conclusion of previously published study to help explain why the current study is of scientific interest. You know that whenever we have a researcher, so the researcher whenever they enter a field, first of all they do a lot of literature review. So these sections, whenever you try to present your data or your argument to the new audience, or you want to publish into a journal, so you have a background, and from that background you trying to distinct or you trying to separate your finding. You want to tell the editor, you want to tell the audience that why and how your data is different from that of the data or the work that already been published. So the introduction section is organized to move from general information to specific informations. The background must be summarized exactly, but it should not be itemized. So limit the introductions to the study that relate directly to the present study. I mean, do not put the extra data, I mean, which is not relevant to your finding. So emphasize your specific contributions to the topic as well. And be remember, once you're writing the introduction section and you reach to the last, so be remember the last sentence of the introduction should be a statement of objective. That's why why you are doing this study, and a statement of hypothesis, that what you have tried to choose or what you want to convey. I mean, if you don't have the scientific or full argument, or you're totally working in a new field, so you better to have the scientific, the hypothesis for that. So this will be a good transition to the next sections that we call methods, in which you explain how you proceed to meet your objective and test your hypothesis. How to cite sources and the introduction sections. So it is important to cite source in introduction section of your paper as evidence, because if you put the arguments and you don't have the cited literature, you don't have the reference from the already published work, so people won't believe on you because you are not all the one, I mean, who have the whole knowledge of the field. So better whatever you saying or what you demand or whatever you claim, you better to have a reference on that, I mean, to support your argument. So be remember there are ways of citing sources in the text, so that the reader can find the full reference and the literature cited sections at the end of the paper, yet the flow of the reading is not badly interrupted. Here you should note that the article by one or two authors are always cited in the text using their last name. However, if there are more than two authors, the last name of the first author is given followed by the abbreviation et al. So it is acceptable and encouraged to cite more than one sources for a particular statement, and there is reason for that. The reason is that it gives the statement more validity and the context and suggests that your research was thorough. Then after the introduction sections in the scientific paper, we have material and method sections. So this section provides all the methodological details necessary for another scientist to duplicate your work. So it should be narrative of the step you took in your experiment or study, not a list of instructions such as you might find in the cookbook. So, an important part of the writing a scientific paper is deciding what bits of information need to be given in details. Do not quote or cite your laboratory manual. So, sometimes experimental details are given as supplementary part, depending upon the type of the articles. So then in scientific papers, we have the result sections. So what is that? These sections present the results of the experiments, but does not attempt to interpret their meaning. Because for that we have a separate section as well. So as with the method sections, the track to writing a good result section is knowing what information to include or exclude. You will not present the raw data that you collected, but rather you will summarize the data with the text table and or figure. So use the text of the paper to state the result of your study, then refer the reader to a table or figure where they can see the data for themselves. So note in most papers nowadays, first sections is consist of results and discussions. So do not include the same data in both a table and a figure. So sometimes the people they have this kind of the mistake that they put the same data both in table and the figure. So it is best to present the data in the table unless there is a visual information that can be gained by using a figure. For example, a figure is useful for reporting a regressions analysis like a line graph. So each table and figure has several lines of text and the captions that explain the information that is being presented. That is, they are made to stand alone. A table legend appear above it, while the legend for a figure appear below the figures. So, if your table include the results of a statistical analysis, be sure to provide the information necessary for the reader to properly evaluate the analysis, that is, sample size, etc. So additional tip on the results sections, numbered tables and figures separately, beginning with ones. Do not attempt to evaluate the results in these sections. Report only what you found. Hold all the discussions of the significance of the results for the discussion section as well. So it is not necessary to describe every step of your statistical analysis. Likewise, cite tables and figures without describing in the detail how the data was manipulated. Explanation of this sort should be appear in the legend or captions written on the same page as the figure or table. You must refer in the text to each figure or table in your paper. A table generally should report summary level data such as means plus minus standard deviations rather than all your raw data. Only use a figure or graph when the data lend themselves to a good visual representations. Avoid using figures that show too many variables or 10 at once. So then we come toward the discussions and assign a big paper. So what is the discussion sections? In these sections, you are free to explain what the result mean or why they differ from what other workers have found. You should interpret your result in the light of other published results by adding additional information from sources you cited in the introduction sections, as well as by introducing new sources. Make sure you provide accurate citations. Relate your discussions back to the objective and question you raise in the introduction sections. However, do not simply restate the objective. Make statement that synthesize all the evidence, including previous work and the current work. Limit your conclusion to those that your data can actually support. You can then proceed to speculate on why this occur and whether you expected this to occur based on the other workers' finding. So suggest future directions. for such new methods, explanations for deviation from previously published results, etc. And this, we remember, this is very important sections because it indicate that you have done at least something in your work, and now you have the direction for the future or for the new researcher who want to repeat or who want to duplicate your work. So how to cite sources and the discussion section? Be remember, it's important to cite sources and the discussion section of your paper as evidence. Is evidence of what? It's evidence of the claims you are making. You normally make a claim and the discussion section, so that is very important, is that your claim should be supported by the evidence from the literatures. And be remember, there are ways of citing sources and the text, so that the reader can find the full references and the literature cited sections at the end of your paper. So be remember, the flow of the reading is not should not be barely interrupted, just like we mentioned in the introduction sections. And along with that, you have to make sure to give full citations and the literature cited sections, that normally we call the references, and which we normally put at the end of your document, at the end of your papers, for all the sources mentioned in the text. So the scientific literature, one of the most important section is the literature cited. What is this? This is the last sections of the papers. Here you should provide in alphabetical or numerical, according to the occurrence in your paper, a listing of all the published work you cited and the text of the paper. I mean, whatever you claim or whatever you write, you normally put as citations to that, that is an evidence from the previously published data. So that normally appear in number inside the big bracket, inside the big bracket in your paper text. And at the last we have last like references, and these references we classified them in number as well as 1 2 3 4, and that we given the authors, the author names, and then the paper name, and then the journal, and then the issue, etc. I mean, every journal have their own style. So here one should note that in most journal, listed a number according to the sequential affairs and the text, the references they are being given. I mean, all the journal they have their own patterns for the references, according to their own design format. So a standard format is used both to cite literature and the text, and to list these studies and the literature cited sections. Consult a recent issue of the respective journal for guidance if you are really interested in that particular journal. I mean, there are different databases that are being available, and they offer a different I mean format for their paper as well as for their books. So, for paper published in the journals, you must provide the date, title, journal name, volume number, and page number. For book, you need the publication date, title, publisher, and place of publications. But nowadays, be remember, they are very easily available in the bibliographic software like EndNotes and the Manley. If you can use that, so they can easily, I mean, rearrange the data, rearrange the references section for you. So you should have good information about that, and you should know how to operate those software, and it make it very easily for you to cite while write. I mean, you should familiar with that software. So that's all we have for this sections. Hope you enjoyed, and along with that you might have learned something very important relevant with the science. So in the next sections we will have again another lecture is part 8 of the current lecture series. In that lecture series, we will have a discussion on some practical tips for scientific writing. So make sure that you remain stay tuned with that particular lecture as well. So till then, bye bye.